Hello and welcome back to Causal 101. I'm Taimur, the founder and CEO of Causal, and over the course of this video series, I'll be teaching you how to use our product. Now, even if you're like me and you usually like figuring things out for yourself, this is actually going to be the quickest way for you to get to grips with Causal, and I can guarantee it. You'll recall from previous videos that we've been building a financial model for Coffee Inc. And where we've got to so far is that we have our financial model, we have a couple of nice charts and a table. And in this video, we're going to be walking through how we can pull in some historical data from Google Sheets. Now, the concepts that you'll be learning in today's video can be applied to any other data source you might have, and Causal integrates directly with pretty much every accounting system, CRM, HR system, and a bunch of other tools as well. And so you don't have to pull in data from Google Sheets, it's just the easiest thing we can use for an example today. Let's dive in. So this is where we got to at the end of the last video. We have our financial model for Coffee Inc. We have some charts and we've got a table. Let's now start pulling in some historical data for our revenue and our costs and so on from Google Sheets. So the first thing you'll need to do is actually get that data into Google Sheets. So what I've done here is just create a blank new Google Sheets. You can do this by just typing sheet.new and hitting enter in your browser. And you should have a blank spreadsheet here. Now, the important thing when it comes to pulling in data from Google Sheets into Causal is the format of the Google Sheet. And you have to get this format exactly right for Causal to understand what's going on. The good news is that the format is not that complicated. Now, the first thing to know is that the first column needs to have the different variables that we want to be pulling in. And so in this case, we'll have data for our sales, we'll have data for our revenue, we'll have data for our cost of goods. We won't do the breakdowns, we'll just do the totals, and we'll have data for our operating costs. So this is what we're going to be creating data for. Now, the second column is where we're going to be putting the category breakdowns if we have them. And so the first cell in that column needs to have the name of the category that we're going to be working with. And so this is our list of products. And so it's the name is the product category. And then the values of this column will be the different products. Now, what we actually need to do here is move the rest of these down a little bit because each product will have its own row. So we'll have a row for coffee beans. We'll have a row for ground coffee. We'll have a row for AeroPress, and we'll have a row for gooseneck kettle. Now, it's crucial that the exact spellings of this product list are the same in Google Sheets as they are in Causal, so that Causal can match the two up. It doesn't matter whether the spelling of the name of the category is the same, since we're going to match that up manually, as you'll see in a sec. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zip back to my model, just copy the list of products to make sure I get this right. And so I can open up the products, I can select these cells here, just hit copy, go back to my Google Sheet, and if I paste those in, well, it looks like we had a couple of capitalization issues, but we've otherwise managed to get that right. So I'll paste that in for our revenue as well, and finally for our cost of goods. And you'll recall that the operating cost does not have a product breakdown. Now, it's important that we also have the name of the variable in each of these rows so Causal knows what it's looking at. And so we do need to have that filled in for the rest of these products too. So the first column is our variable names, the second column is our category, and the rest of the columns will be the different months for which we have historical data. And we'll start with January 2023, we'll have February 2023, and we should now be able to drag this all the way across. It's currently December, so we have data maybe until November 2023. Actually, you know what, why don't we fill this in for the whole year? And this is going to form the structure of our Google Sheet. What I'll do is just make these columns and rows bold, just so that we know that these are kind of the structure. And I can pin these if I wanted as well. And now in the rest of these cells that I've just highlighted, we're going to be having the different values for each of these items. I'm going to just use random numbers here, and I'd recommend you do the same if you're following this tutorial. And so we'll just use a bunch of random numbers, and we're just going to drag them all the way across, and I'll reduce the number of decimal points here, and we can make it a currency if we wanted. So I've just used random numbers here. If you have real data, obviously use that, but for the purposes of this example, random numbers is absolutely fine. So to recap, we have our variable names in column A, we have our product category in column B, and we have the different months in column C through N with the different cells showing the values of each of these variables for each of those products. This Google Sheet looks good. Let's now jump back to Causal and pull this data in. The easiest way to do that from here is to click on the plus button right next to where it says data here in the left sidebar. We'll go over to new data source and click on Google Sheets. You'll see a big blue button that lets you authenticate with Google. So this will open a flow where you can authenticate with Google. Just click allow. You'll now be able to see a list of all of your Google files. And so we'll select Coffee Inc. Financials from here, and we'll select Sheet 1. We'll click Next. Causal's now showing us a preview of the data. It looks like it's managed to get that correctly. And it's asking us to choose a format. By default, it'll try and pick the right format for us. And in this case, we're going to be working with the time series format. Now, obviously, there are other formats Causal supports as well. But you'll have to go into our specific video on data to understand how those formats work. For now, the time series format is all we need to worry about. We'll hit Next. Looks like Causal's pulled that in okay. And in this final step, what we need to do is map the product column from Google Sheets, so that's this one, it says product, to the product category in Causal. And so we can see that there's a product column in Google Sheets. We can see it has 4 items. We can see a preview of the items. And if we click on this button here, we can see our product category, which we've already created, and Causal is recommending that we actually just map it to this. If we didn't have a product category already in Causal, we'd be able to create a new one directly here on the fly and just connect up to the data. But in this case, we have that category, so we're just going to select it. So we've connected our data, we've mapped our categories, and we're now going to click Finish. Causal should now show us a preview of the data. We can see that we have the category breakdown for revenue, sales, and cost of goods, which is great. And we don't have it for operating costs, which we expect. If you click on the Overview tab, what you can do is set up an auto refresh. So you can set this up to refresh every day or week or month, and the time of the refresh. We're not going to worry about it for now, but it's there if you need it. Let's now close this pop-up. You should now see a little preview of Coffee Inc. Financials down below. I'm going to hide the charts just to give us a little bit more room here. And now we can start connecting up the different parts of our model to our data. Let's hide this bottom panel and go into the data column right next to the trend column for sales. If we click through into this column, we'll see that our Coffee Inc. Financials sheet is shown here as a data source. And if we click through, we can see the 4 different line items coming in from that sheet. And all we need to do is check the box for sales in order to connect up sales here to sales from our Google Sheet. And so now we should see this little 1 here in the data column that's telling us that this variable is connected to one range from the data source. And if we expand this out, we should see that Causal is pulling in the data values for a bunch of these cells. We'll see a data icon in these cells. These are real numbers coming from the data. This isn't based on our formula. And we'll have those data values until December 2023. From January 2024 onwards, we won't be seeing a data icon. And that's because we don't have historical data until that point in time. And so Causal will start using the formula to do the forecast from that point in time. And so that's how data works when you bring it into Causal. It overrides the historical values where it can, and where there is no data, the formula will automatically be used to do a calculation. So we've connected up sales in the same way we'll connect up revenue. We'll click through and hit revenue here. We'll do total costs of goods, and we'll do operating costs as well. And so now we should see data values in a bunch of these cells, and you'll see that the trend line has kind of changed a little bit based on the numbers in our data. Obviously, we've just used random numbers, and so we won't expect this data to line up very well with our forecasts, but that's okay for the purposes of this example. And it's really that simple to bring historical data into Causal. You create the data source. Typically, you won't be entering in the data manually. You'll be connecting directly to your accounting system or your CRM or data warehouse. And then in a couple of clicks, you can connect each variable in Causal to the right set of data from your data source. The final important concept when it comes to working with data in Causal is what we call the last actuals date. Now, the last actuals date is a way for us to tell Causal that anything before that date should be treated as historical data, and anything after that date should be treated as a forecast. You can find the last actuals date in the data section of the time settings of the model in the top right here, and we can toggle that on. And in this case, we know that we have data until December. If we now click apply changes, we should see we have last actuals written here in the column header for December 2023. And what this means is that when we open up our charts, Causal will stylize anything before the last actuals date as historicals. So on a line chart, it'll be shown with a solid line. You can't see it very clearly. And forecast will be shown with a dashed line. On bar charts, again, you'll see solid bars, which you can't see on this chart. For historicals, you'll see shaded bars for forecasts. And in tables, by default, you will see blue numbers for historicals. You'll see black numbers for forecasted values. Now, suppose a month goes by and we want to pull in the latest data for January. Let's go back into our Google Sheet and just add another month of data to see what that flow would look like. We'll create a column for January 2024. We'll just drag these random number formulas across. And if we hop back to Causal, we can now pull the latest data in. Now, the easiest way to bring in that January data is to click on this last actuals button in the cell for December 2023. So we can click on this, we can go forwards to 2024, click on January 2024 to tell Causal that we want to move the last actuals over to January. Causal is asking us which data sources we would like to refresh as part of this process. We can see that we have our Google Sheets. It was last refreshed 7 minutes ago before we had the new data. And what we can do is just hit apply. What this will do in a single step is roll forward the last actuals date to the month that we've just selected, January, and it'll bring in the latest data from our data source by refreshing that data source. And so now we'll see data icons in this column here for January. If we open up our data source and click on see more options, we should see that it was first refreshed 8 minutes ago when we created it and we pulled in all these different things. It was next refreshed 27 seconds ago when we ran the last actuals roll forward process. And so each month, whenever we're ready to bring in the new data, the easiest way to do that is to click on the last actuals button, select the month that we want to roll forwards to, and Causal will automatically let you refresh all of the relevant data sources. This starts to become really useful once you have multiple different data sources connected to Causal. It saves you having to go through and refresh 4 different data sources individually. And so those are the key concepts when working with data. We've walked through how to connect to a data source, in this case Google Sheets. We've walked through how to link that data into your model by using the data column for the different variables. And we've walked through the process of rolling your model forwards and pulling in another month's data. That's it for this video. In the next and final video of the series, we're going to walk through how you can share this model with the rest of your team. See you there.